Okay, so we're just going to talk about the EU Digital Omnibus uh, and just some kind of notes and things about that. Just before we do, just two notes. We've got two sort of free tools that we've released. One is a Chrome extension, and Will's just going to post the link to that in chat. So that's the Consent Mode Monitor Chrome extension, which lets you do a free sort of scan of any website. It's a bit like Built With or Ghostly, but it just checks the GTM settings for consent. So go check that out. I think there's 300 users that have installed it now. Quite good if you're an agency and want to just kind of audit or scan a client site, or if it's a brand and you're running in Europe or using consent mode and you want to kind of sanity check. It's quite helpful and free. Uh, the reason we introduced the Chrome extension is that sometimes the manual scanner gets blocked by Cloudflare and whatnot. So if this one basically gets the GTM account ID from the browser and then runs the scan. About myself, so I'm Phil Pearce. I'm analytics founder and director at Measure Minds. I've been doing this stuff for like way too long, and we're also like a cookiebot and user-centrics reseller. And I've got a book on Amazon about GTM, and increasingly, we've been doing more stuff about both consent mode, CMP setup, CMP validation, and kind of identifying holes at scale, and also problems with some of the existing sort of industry standards with both Google consent mode, CMP kind of setups, and also some of the US kind of laws. I did a different talk about the sort of what's happening in the US. That was part of Measure Summit. I may possibly do a public version of that soon. Or if you've got a login for Measure Summit, I'd suggest you go read that. Some good information in there. And our app itself, we're very close to winning awards on the app. We keep getting to the finalists, but not winning. So more people that use it, that will help us kind of justify the sort of funding in the app or apps plural. Just a quick legal disclaimer: I'm not a lawyer, so anything in here, please take with a pinch of salt. Or you can always just ask ChatGPT for its if it's correct or not correct. ChatGPT is great for like understanding legal documents. But it's even better if you build or turn it into your own kind of legal persona. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. You can actually take, let's say, a picture of yourself or build a custom prompt. So in this case, I've got Harvey Specter on the left and me on the right. Combine the two, and you end up with the Harvey Specter bot, or a more legal posh version of me, um, aka Spectre bot. So you can put in a custom prompt similar to this one, and it will then analyze your prompts and give you a slightly more targeted response with a quite comical kind of tongue-in-cheek kind of response within it. As I said, you'll get these access to this slide, so you can paste that in as custom prompt beforehand, and then ask it legal questions about Omnibus or similar, and you get some quite funny kind of replies. What did Harvey the Spectre bot say on this one? Omnibus is not just about tearing down the EU digital rule book; it's also about making it easier to follow, enforce, and make it less complex. Cut out duplication, reduce cookie banner fatigue, and sort of simplify things. And it's also to help with the pending kind of AI or need to sort of train data and have consent to kind of do it. So simplify and allow for competitiveness with Europe versus other kind of countries. So what is the omnibus? So it's simplifying GDPR, e-privacy, and the AI Act. It also is designed to reduce that compliance burden, especially for smaller companies. Yeah, so in essence, basically, there's harmonization around GDPR, e-privacy, AI Act, etc. So that's really what the Digital Omnibus is trying to do: simplify into one big kind of package rather than lots of other sort of smaller ones. Proposal stage in November. There's quite a few non-profits that have done some really good analysis of the amendments. And as I said, it's again at least a year away for adoption. There may also be a staggered approach for some of the cookie requirements and browser signals, because it takes time for browsers to push out updates, test them, etc. And also it takes time for CMPs to update as well. So I expect an additional lag even when it becomes law. Some of these changes, so moving from ePrivacy to an update to GDPR Article 88, this browser level setting, and I should note that the GCP signal, which is more of a California law for a targeting opt-out, it maybe that gets kind of bundled with these changes. Because that's a browser-based piece. It's likely there's going to be a kind of accept or reject, so not so many options. Because and also that will help standardize with kind of dark patterns, because the browser then they're going to decide what the buttons look like, not like the CMPs, and then they'll be naturally equally easily to select. The kind of slightly strange kind of piece within them is the proposal is a 6-month duration for remembering acceptance or deny, which is rather odd because normally the default was 12 months. And maybe that's a negotiating strategy, and it may be changed or standardized to 12 months, similar to kind of California, which is also sort of 12 months. So it's possible that all these kind of the sort of banner blindness problem or cookie fatigue may standardize into one standard kind of opt-in, opt-out, or accept, reject, very similar to what happens on iOS, where you have a standardized kind of button for particular things. There are actually on web, there are some existing frameworks which are standardized. So here we've got a navigator, HTML5 attribute for geolocation, where it's like accept or block, like share your location. This is from like Google Maps. You might see this. And this is how it renders on iOS, like a don't allow or allow. So basically, it's the same kind of everywhere in terms of the look and feel. Similar for HTML5 push notifications, where you get a block or allow, and to see updates or not updates. So this is the browser kind of doing the work, deciding on the design and the buttons, not the CMP, etc. And here's another one for push notification on iOS. So that's what I'm expecting, something like that for these proposals, although as far as I'm aware, I've not seen a kind of working model of an update to WebKit to see what this actual kind of consent banner may or may not look like. So these are just examples of what currently exists, which is the kind of closest thing to it. So as I said, this is not something you need to worry about now. It's more like 12, 24-month kind of window. And it's but the impact to CMPs is potentially quite significant, because they're going to need to more like still listen for signals, but it's not a signal coming from a cookie; it's be coming from the browser, and then interpreting and deciding what to do with that signal. There are a couple of specific use cases though where CMPs may need to adjust kind of what they do. So you've still got potentially a hybrid situation where you're going to have cookies and a browser signal. There's a question of which one takes precedence there, and also what these proposals at the moment, it's not clear if they've got like second layers or more granular control. How is that going to work? What's going to happen with sites that need very specific instances like publishers, for example, or TCF? And then the other one, there's talk of a media exemption, a little bit similar to sort of consent or pay, where the publishers can kind of push or sort of overwrite sort of a consent. And just a slight note on that, with consent or pay, the AI bots, like Atlas or similar, they get stuck in a loop when you get a consent or pay window, where instead of them clicking deny, which forces them into enter credit card details, they then go back to the first page and click accept. Whereas on non-consent or pay, the AI browsers default to kind of a deny button. So that's also kind of an interesting sort of problem, but kind of related to this. So the other thing that's mentioned here, personal data, the definition of it is potentially kind of going to change. So it's currently what can you reasonably identify? Can you reasonably identify a person? Changing to can the data controller reasonably identify? What does that mean in reality? It means what does a cookie ID mean to you? So if a cookie ID is just anonymous, you're okay, potentially. But if you can link that with other data, potentially transaction ID, user ID, email hash, that sort of thing, and identify that person, then there's it potentially might become personal data. So the context of what personal data means may change depending on this kind of linkage kind of piece. And so on that note, in under GDPR, with things like GA4 deny pings, that's currently been used as sort of a workaround for not storing cookies on a terminal, like on a user's device. So the existing kind of workarounds were there for under GDPR and sort of relaying parameters in the URL, not storing it. It's possible that there may be other kind of workarounds to sort of or grey areas to what is identifiable or not. It really needs kind of clear examples. The other one that's a real kind of question mark is GCL IDs. A Google Click ID, it's not necessarily it's more identifying a click, but the click could be used to identify the user. Is that allowed or not allowed? And also the linkage on that is linking to pull in cost data, which is needed for brands to be able to kind of work out, is there marketing allowed or not allowed, or working or not working. It's the classic kind of which 50% of my marketing is working or not. So that is a big kind of grey area. Same also happens in California, where there's a question. They say that you can get away with adding GA4 if you don't kind of link to Google Ads, not just remarketing linking, but cost data linking. The problem is it greatly reduces the value you get from an analytics tool if you can't run kind of ROAS or CPA reports, and you need the cost but data bit and the conversions bit to be able to kind of run those equations. So that's a big kind of unknown piece that I'm sort of seeking clarity on myself. The other one on this linkage bit is there's other systems involved. It's not just the website, not just the CMP. We've also got CRM systems, so like HubSpot, Salesforce, etc. E-commerce systems, so your kind of Shopify, Magento, and then obviously like third-party like CDPs as an example, so Klaviyo, etc. So it's that linkage bit, which potentially from those, which is going to allow that data to be identifiable, and then it becomes personal. The good news is there's an AI kind of loophole. So if the data is potentially used for training, then you may be able to kind of sort of store it. The only slight problem is that it's not clear at the moment. There's not a do not train signal. And so, for instance, at the moment, most CMPs don't have an option saying, do you allow your data to be used for training? The closest two things that exist that are there for it is add underscore personalization, which is part of a Google consent mode, which can be repurposed for do not train, or that some of the vendors themselves have a setting in the tool. So ChatGPT and LinkedIn both have a do not train opt out actually when you're logged into the tool. But again, not a clear way to send a user signal to say, don't use my data for training. And also, it's quite important to determine what that signal is, because removing user data historically is very difficult on these large language models. So I think that needs a bit of clarity. And yeah. So the sensitive fields are still remain though, and the important just a note on these ones, a field can be inferred to be sensitive. A good example of that is health conditions, which could be inferred from someone's search or inferred from, let's just say, Healthline example, where people viewed a page about a medical condition and were active for long enough on that page, and thus it was could be inferred that they had a medical condition. So just like those are a kind of area for extra kind of carefulness. So the key point is that so analytics potentially can be allowed by default, so not needing consent as part of these requirements. However, there's 6 extra pieces to allow analytics to be kind of on by default, and or only be using an opt-out model. So clear opt-out, that's obviously an easy one. Similar to kind of US laws, which are opt-out mode. Data is aggregated, so GA4 generally is aggregated. Maybe the Explorer reports might need to be somehow hidden, but and also it's used for single purpose. So we normally recommend setting up GA4 in analytics only mode, and then using the Google Ads remarketing pixels for both remarketing and sort of conversions. So try and limit the scope of analytics to single purpose mode, not analytics plus remarketing. And then used only for internal statistics or basic analytics purpose only, so not used for potentially functional or obviously remarketing. Now the two extra ones down here are a bit more of a problem. So data processing on your own infrastructure. So it's not just kind of hosting the BigQuery data on an account you control. It's also the kind of that data collection piece as well. And then also no transfer to external data processors. So doing these last 2 on GA4 is potentially a bit of a problem. Here's GA4 on the left, and then Piwik Matomo on the right. So this data ownership is a problem. A kind of shared cloud or lack of private cloud is also a problem. And then processing in USA is also not a problem. And then the fact that it's owned by an ad network is obviously not ideal. So and as I said, similar problems exist for HIPAA. So it may be that this proposals in 12, 24 months may accelerate the usage of kind of additional analytics tools and kind of dual tracking. So people running GA4 and Piwik or similar, so that they have extra kind of data for that 12-month kind of lead time before there's a potential kind of change. Now there could be a last minute change and some sort of agreement done, or Google introduce some ways of doing self-hosting for GA4 or like kind of almost like an on-premise or Urchin style kind of mode, but that doesn't exist at the moment. But that would be my hope. Okay, and the other changes that are being standardized. So incident reporting, so breach notification is being standardized. Time periods for breach notification. The template for data protection impact assessment is also being standardized to one form, not multiples. So that's a good thing. And the list of providers to send that to is also being standardized. And then subject access requests also are being standardized, and also potentially the ability to refuse or charge for subject access requests if they're clearly abusive or creating a high kind of burden. So the other change, more flexible AI implementations. So the rules for SMEs and being simplified. Okay, EU sandbox available in 2028. So attribution is going to get a bit harder, unfortunately, because of these linkage, which basically need to be unlinked for instance, cost data and user ID, etc. So sessionization is not going to be as easy. Personalization will shift to zero party. Okay, so opt-in for first party data becomes more important for vouchers and affiliates, etc. Although just a note about loyalty programs. So CNIL, the French regulator, in the last week or so, dished out a 3.5 million fine to into sports for their loyalty program because although there was a value exchange, like a 5% discount or $5 off, and then between 5 and 15% discount, depending on the number of purchases, which is great for the user. What was not clear was that when they signed up to the loyalty program, their data was then shared with Facebook or other social networks. So it was the ad user um, personalization field that was not part of the CMP. The flag didn't pass to Facebook, so users couldn't opt out of customer match. They could only opt in or out of targeting. So, and it was not clear that their data was being used for customer match. So, an additional note, or be extra careful about the loyalty programs kind of piece there. And actually, that is something that if it does shift to a browser-based system, then it will simplify some of these additional controls. Because remember, we got stacked problems. You got, Google Consent Mode V1, Google Consent Mode V2. You've got blocking rules. You've got activation rules, consent mode categories. Client side, server side. And it's becoming increasingly complex. So any systems that allow stuff to reduce the chance of a client breaking the rules, be it accidentally, is potentially a good thing. The other notes on here, data can be identified a person. So if data is confirmed to be personal data, so for instance, you can do linkage and identify a person from that user ID, transaction ID, email hash, etc., then you do need to ask for consent. It may be that in addition to dual tracking, Google Analytics and PWIC or similar, it may also be that we get dual analytics tracking, one set of analytics running in kind of omnibus mode, and then another set running in normal GA4 mode. It would probably require separate cookies, which is possible via the kind of GTM and GA4 kind of JavaScript API. But that's an interesting idea in terms of editing the tracker to make GA4 Omnibus compliant, but still keeping an additional one with additional tracker, which is in benchmarking or kind of same mode as it is currently being kind of run. The 6-month cookie duration is a really strange piece within the proposal. As I said, normally it's 12 months from kind of last interaction. I don't quite know why they shortened the period. Bear in mind, the aim is to reduce cookie fatigue. So why would you want to have to keep asking people every 6 months? Doesn't really make sense to me. The only benefit of this would be if it's easier to kind of opt in or out. You could say shortening or resetting a kind of a consent flag or asking for consent again, maybe a sort of a benefit. The other point, which I'm not clear about yet, is CMPs track opt-in and opt-out, and you kind of get a report of what's your opt-out rate. If it does shift to the browser, there's not actually going to be a means to count the number of opt-outs. So actually then modeling or similar to that becomes more difficult. Obviously, if you don't need modeling and you can get away with not using linkage, then that's okay. But for targeting tags like Google Ads Conversion Pixel, which you're going to need to get consent for, how does modeling work in that environment where you don't have denied pixels is an interesting kind of question. It may be the 6-month logic changes to 12 months, which would make sense. Again, California is 12 months. Why would they want to change it to 6 months? It's a bit nuts. The browser consent could fundamentally change user flows. So it's going to just introduce a kind of a mechanism in the middle, again, reduced cookie fatigue, banner blindness. But yeah, it's not clear how that's going to look, how many options there's going to be on it. And we don't yet have anything visual to see from it. And also whether it's going to cause affiliates to sort of change their business model and voucher code sites, etc. It's unlikely we're going to have a bunch of individual purposes like this. I think that's kind of too much control. That kind of defies the point of simplifying. But it may be there's some additional settings in the browser which are more granular. Okay, I'm going to skip over this to get to the conclusion, I just want to just mention this point. Actually, this is an important one. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm seeing that ad personalization field be used for the kind of do not train. However, there's a massive problem with ad personalization, which is the CMP's bundle consent. So when you click allow on sort of targeting category, and most CMPs will automatically send a granted for ad user data and ad personalization. They don't do granular consent, as is kind of identified with the Intersports kind of loyalty program. So it is in some CMPs, it's possible to expose that, but most don't. So it then creates a problem. How do you unbundle uh, a targeting flag or signal where you've kind of sent it with one granted for targeting, but not necessarily per individual purposes for that type of targeting, i.e. email hash and training or ad personalization. So I personally think the only way around that is to create a brand new field, be it AI modeling, and split out the field. But again, then there's going to be need to ask an additional question, which makes it more complicated. And at the moment, similar to the old do not track or AK do not target kind of model or DNT, which has become kind of GCP, it only asks one question when really it's two questions that need to be asked. So this is a huge problem. I don't see an easy solution to it yet, but it may be the browsers can figure that out with more granular settings. And the other slight issue on this, on GTM server side, most plugins or kind of tags in server side only read the the G100, G11, etc. fields. They don't read consent mode v2, which has these additional fields within it. So there's a secondary problem about Google standardizing GTM server side for reading default consent. So, for instance, a lot of the state plugins only read Google Consent Mode v1. They ignore these additional fields within Consent Mode v2. So, in summary, prepare for this. Good news is potentially your CMP bill will reduce. So, especially if you want a OneTrust or one that's going to massively reduce. However, you're going to need to plan for hosted analytics, which means there's going to be a cost, an implementation time, and hosting cost, etc. Fun fact: yesterday night, we had to get a taxi from the hotel to the sort of like restaurants and shops type thing, and like the first taxi, like basically like the wheels of it were like literally almost like kind of like almost half a submarine because all the roads were like flooded yesterday evening. And the weirdest thing is like seeing guys on motorbikes going through like knee-deep water and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like that's crazy. But I think I'm in Santa Marta in north of Colombia. It doesn't normally rain here. It's fairly kind of like stable and warm. So, but it's just the crazy amounts of water appear to have kind of affected the internet infrastructure. The Hilton Hotel next to it, like next around the corner, actually had no power for like the last 24 hours. So I've got power. It's just the internet's a bit unstable. The so I don't know where I got to on this. At least it kind of got to the summary. Um, Basically, the good news is cost of CMPs will reduce. Bad news is people are going to need to, or brands are going to need to pay for a hosted analytics provider and plan for that. In at least 12 months' time. For the hosted analytics, good news is that if you don't use linking, you can use modeling. You don't need an opt-in, although you do still need an opt-out potentially. The cost data, obviously, and user ID sessionization, potentially you can't do that as part of Omnibus. EU and US harmonization. So EU in essence is becoming less strict, US becoming more strict, as in the US you only really need to worry about targeting cookies, not so much analytics cookies, and EU is kind of moving in that same direction. And also given that the EU has a EU has a requirement for a global privacy control, which the browsers need to add within the next 12 months. So that kind of ties in with this kind of also browser-based change that the EU is also proposing. What's not mentioned so much in this is what's the role of the CMS platforms. For instance, Shopify has a consent API, BigCommerce has consent API, HubSpot also in there, but those CMSs would need to be updated to connect to those signals. The impact of those agents. So the other sort of slight problem we may have is that a lot of the agents like Atlas, etc., will automatically decline consent. What do you do in that situation if there's a rise in AI agents? Does it because then there's no longer a cookie fatigue problem. It's more of a tracking a human's problem, because the AI agents don't currently say I'm an AI agent, because they don't want to be personalized or treated in a different way to a human. In the same way that in incognito mode, there's not an easy way to detect it running in incognito mode, because Chrome doesn't want a different user experience in incognito mode versus standard browsing.